Welcome to On My Couch. My co-host Sue and I started this process because we really wanted to talk to interesting people about interesting topics that were relevant to what we do, learn a little bit more, and then maybe bring it to life in our respective work. So I'll introduce our special guest, Jen, in a minute, but the intent of this conversation is to learn more, ask some questions, have a conversation, and really just sort of learn some new stuff. By way of introduction, my name's Damien. I'm the owner of OMC Group, and what OMC Group does is we work with individuals, teams, and organisations to enable effective change. But really simply, what we do is we help people work better together. I've been doing that for 12 years now, and really fortunate to work with great people and great organisations. So, Sue, what about yourself? How would you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Damien. So my career has been many and varied, I suppose is the best way to describe it. And most recently, I've been doing some board roles for some not-for-profits and also some private companies and doing some consulting in the shopping centre marketing and management space. But really looking forward to our conversation today and unpacking the Jenn Giordano story.
Cool. And then, Jen, thank you so much dialing in from Raleigh, North Carolina. You're our first person from North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, to be on my hey. So
I love hearing that.
Yeah, you've made the big time. So Jen, I'll get you to introduce yourself in a minute, but just the highlights, if you like. Founder and owner of SmartfulWorks, adjunct executive coach with the Centre for Creative Leadership, and then previously with PwC, Manager Advisory, and then also started your career with JP Morgan Chase as well. So super pumped to have you here. Really keen to have this discussion. And one of the things Sue and I talk about with different guests, we have a range of different subject matters and themes, but one of the themes that tends to come through most regularly is this leadership, and so that's what we really wanted to sort of have a bit of a discussion today from your perspective, and really sort of explore this concept of leadership, learn more about the work that you're doing and your observations as well. So, but maybe before we get into that, I mean, maybe tell us your story, in terms of your current state. You're running a team of facilitators and coaches around the world from Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a significant achievement in itself. But maybe just tell us your story.
Well, thank you both for having me. I am thrilled to be here with y'all. My story, I'll kind of work backwards. I am incredibly passionate about leadership and teams. I believe that we wake up in the morning and we spend a lot of time with those that we work with, and we really, to do it in a healthy way is going to help us personally, but also it kind of vibrates out to helping the organizations we work for, the families we get home to, and the world that we live in. So I feel very purpose-driven in my work. And I started my own firm, SmartfulWorks, about 15 years ago, along the lines of really doing this work with leaders and teams. Before that, as you said, I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers doing work with their advisory, where organizations had gone through change, and we went in and we did the human capital side of the change. So how do we retain people, motivate people, get them to move along and buy into the change? And then before that was in the banking space and did recruiting and training. So I've always been kind of on the people side of large scale organizations. And I say that every organization is wholly unique and exactly similar. So, and that has been my biggest lesson over all of these years. I've really loved it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Sue?
I'm just writing down wholly unique. And what did you say? Wholly unique and
exactly similar.
Exactly similar. Yeah, that is so true. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was writing down, because obviously leadership can take many forms. So what sort of areas do you focus on? And I suppose maybe perhaps start with a definition of what is leadership?
Yeah, great question. I say that leaders can be at every level. I believe that I think we are breaking down the misconception that a leader is at the top of the org chart. And I've loved seeing that pendulum shift, but a leader can be somebody who's 22 and just entered the workforce. If they are powerful at communicating, you have a great energy and excitement, and there's a dynamic kind of move behind somebody at that age, they can be a leader. Absolutely. They do not need to be at the top of the org chart. However, you can have somebody at the top of the org chart who is doing all of that as well. But I really do believe a leader is somebody who is able to connect with other humans on an emotional level, on whatever it is that they are working on, or possibly on a personal conversation, and get excited together. And that really is what leadership is. I think it can be in any industry, in any part of the world. So that's what I believe that leadership is. And then Susan, I can't remember the second part of your question.
So so what aspect do you focus on when you work with different clients and different teams? What's sort of the structure, and how do you go about it?
Yep. So I would say from the individual, I do one-on-one coaching. So sometimes that involves 360 interviews with people they work with, or 360 assessments. I know Damien and I have exchanged some 360 assessments that we use. And then it moves really into what do you want to get out of this? I think that coaching is really about what the other person wants to get out of it, and what they put into it is what they get out of it. I say that it's the sacred confidential space that we have with people. And a lot of times leaders think, gosh, I can't tell somebody about my insecurities about this or this friction. And we give them a space to do all that while reflecting and developing and growing. And then the second bucket is this area of, team and organizational facilitation. So topics that are relevant and prevalent in the workspace. So courageous conversations, influencing skills, the intergenerational workforce. How are we dealing with burnout? Really anything kind of in that soft skills bucket. And then the third is just my real passion around culture. And we hear a lot of words around culture, and organizations so often don't exactly know what that means. So going in and listening to people, collecting data, interviewing people, helping them understand, what are your values? What is your mission? What is your vision? And now, are people on your team or in your organization, are they aware of this? Lots of people will say, well, we have that someplace on our hard drive. I'm like, well, if somebody has to go searching for it on the hard drive, that's not, cutting it. So are they living it, breathing it? And then how are we really helping organizations get their folks to live and breathe their values, vision, and mission?
And so over the course of your time running SmartfulWorks, have you seen the demand for specific topics ebb and flow, or is it generally consistent in the buckets that you've just described?
Definitely ebb and flow. I say the most interesting thing when you get to, the end of each year is to look back, and it's always a patchwork. Always think on, January 1st is not necessarily what happened at the end of December. And you have to go with where the clients are going. And, I think 10, 15 years ago, the word millennial became very big, and everybody was talking about, what can you do for my millennials? I need to retain them. And then, about 8 years ago was grit and resilience. And then guess what? COVID hit. So we all learned grit and resilience. And then now, how do you motivate and retain a hybrid virtual workforce that looks so different than it did 10 years ago? And so we have to really go with what we're seeing affect our clients. And I think that it changes every year.
Thank you.
And Jen, you and I, actually, you just had a bit of a flashback to when I was working with an executive team, and we were doing a bit of a refresh around strategy and team dynamics. And I said to them, look, okay, you've got a vision. Let's just, in a very simple exercise, just write it down. And a couple of them started writing, and a couple of them sort of sat there awkwardly, and two of them said, look, I've got that in my office. Can I just go and get that? Sort of meant
the problem.
Yeah, which sort of meant they really didn't have a vision, I don't think. So anyhow, so that your story resonated. So you and I I'm fortunate enough to be part of the SmartfulWorks team, but and I really enjoy working with you and the broader team. So you've sort of touched on it a little bit, but the SmartfulWorks, the purpose and the why. You sort of started that with your introduction, but can you just expand on that a little bit more? What is the purpose of SmartfulWorks?
And SmartfulWorks is an organization where I believe that we have become really a wonderful team. And so, and I launched it 15 years ago, kind of with my why. And I always say that unfortunately, my why, I really, really had to dig deep for this. Many people maybe listening to this know Simon Sinek and the why. And I was thinking, gosh, I'm talking about this and what really is my why? And the unfortunate part was, however, I've kind of come around to it, was my why came out of a really negative experience with a leader early in career. And I wanted it to be a positive experience. I wanted it to be like, oh, I had this fabulous and this person maybe really, and it really became out of a negative experience. And I'll tell you that story. I was working in New York City, and two things happened with this leader. This particular leader knew that my faith tradition brings me to church on Sundays, and he invited me into his office on Monday, and he said, I hear that you go to church on Sunday. I really believe, and he took a wad of cash out. I believe this needs to become your God. And I thought, wow, I really don't feel, and I don't have to share exactly a faith tradition with anybody, but I didn't feel that I had not discussed this with him. It was very odd. It just felt very odd to me. And then fast forward a few months later, I was in New York City working for that same company with that same boss, and 9/11 hit. And it was a really emotional day, emotional time. And he went home to his family. He lived outside of New York City. I was young. I couldn't leave the city. I was safe. Uh, and he said, our team needs to go into the office. Even though there was really no reason for us to go in the office. We worked at a bank. We were not healthcare providers or, folks that were working down on the pile at the World Trade Center. But he didn't come in to the office. And just that idea of, wow, this person really feels like they're disconnected with their people. And it sparked something in me at that early age in my 20s of, okay, well, I'm learning how to be a different leader. I don't want to be that leader. And so, my why has really evolved into over the years of, okay, so how do I become a different leader? So as I moved up in my career, I wanted to be somebody different. I wanted to align emotionally with the folks around me and hear about their values and learn about their values and encourage their values. And then it became, how do I, as I, kind of moved into this leadership space, how do I support leaders and continue to take this and have them be the best leader they can be? And, I've now been a mother for over a decade, and it's how can I help other leaders in this world be the leaders I want my children to follow? In a world where sometimes it feels like there's a vacuum of leaders. I don't think there is. I think that we have fabulous leaders. And so how can I support this industry of leadership, so my children have a world to grow up in that supports that? And that's my why. And I believe that, people who are on the SmartfulWorks team, their why, they may have gotten there differently, but I think we're all really trying to support a global world of leaders to leave this world, a cliche, just a little bit better than when we found it. So
Yeah, great. That's a really powerful, powerful story. And I'm curious whether that was clearly one very formative and powerful experience. When you reflect back, have there been other sort of experiences or insights in your career that you reflect on? Either as a hey, this is this is not what I want to do, which is that really powerful story. But also, is there a positive sort of experience that you've had that you reflect on? You think, hey, I want to create more of that. I want to do more of that.
yeah. And the flip side, the other side of that story is years ago when I was in working at PwC, realized I really appreciated my time deeply at PwC. I loved the work I was doing, but being a consultant is hard and being on the road is hard. And after many, many years, I was thinking, what do I want to do? And my master's is in organizational psychology. And I happened to be partnered with somebody it was an outside executive coach who'd come in to facilitate a onboarding kind of leadership course for the people who were just out of college. And I was the internal consultant for PwC, the kind of internal person to go facilitate. And I was blown away by this woman, Tina.
Yeah.
And at the end of our 3 days, I walked up to her and I said, I want to be you when I grow up. You know, this is when I was like 30 something. And she said, honey, we're going to set up a call once a month and I'm going to, help you. And she didn't have to
Wow.
do that. Tina is the reason why I went out on my own, the reason why I launched SmartfulWorks. I
Wow.
spoke to her the hour before we got on this call. Tina and
Yep.
I were on the call together. She's still a mentor. She took me under her wing. She took chances on me when nobody else would. She is there for me when I need her still today. So that's kind of the opposite of that. And I feel very lucky to have her as my kind of mentor leader in my life.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story. And the fact that you're still there and still connected, that's awesome.
Deeply connected. So
Yeah. And so I know you're going to jump in a minute, but Jen, I've just realized, we've known each other for a while now. SmartfulWorks, potentially a dumb question. And why SmartfulWorks? What's the sort of the message behind the name and the brand?
No, I think that that's a great question. It really is around that idea of how are we working smarter and not harder. And, very simplistic, but really that's where it came from is, what are we doing today? And I have to accredit another colleague of mine who helped come up with it, this woman, Starla, years ago, around, how are we working in this world where sometimes we can work really hard and not necessarily smart.
Yeah. Good. Love it. Good. Sue?
So you mentioned a couple of words. This is what I've heard: culture and leadership. And I think the lady that you're still in touch with, the word that sprung to mind when I heard that story was generous. So what would you say would be attributes of really good leaders? And then how does that shape the culture of the organization? Because I'm guessing your experience back in the 9/11 period was, I wonder why that individual behaved like they did. Was it some pressure that they were experiencing in terms of that cultural piece? Because we all start out wanting to be great people, but sometimes circumstance and other factors influence. So that's sort of a big question. So what are the attributes of good leaders, and how do you think culture impacts perhaps some leadership styles and behaviors?
Great question. I think it's twofold. I think that there are basic leadership pillars that, as you said, the word generous, the word curious, the word empathetic. I think that those are all very important. And I think the flip side of that is, again, those are kind of the pillars or the foundations I believe that we should all kind of have. But how we come at them can be very different. So I think the other side is what are your strengths? What are you bringing? And then that can be very unique to each leader. And so that authenticity into who you are and what you bring to work and how is it different than whoever else is sitting there, I think is, the attributes that I believe are really, really important. And I think that, I actually listened to a speaker yesterday talking about those leaders who really, they get a lot of joy out of the growth and advancement and the fruitful nature of their teams and that kind of self-sacrifice. I think that that's a wonderful leadership attribute. We kind of throw around the words servant leader, but what really are you doing to make sure that your teams are growing and getting what they need individually and as a team so that they can continue to be successful in whatever their path is. Sometimes it's not always back on your team. Sometimes it's, that they leave the organization because that's what's best for them, or that they move to another team, that's what's best for them. But you are a person who's supporting that.
Yeah.
And so then that question around culture, then what do you think comes first, the culture or the leader, or do they mesh together?
You realize we've only got, this is a short conversation, right? This is just, there's a litany of, of books and, programs and masters that are trying to answer that same question. So Jen, over to you. If you could just come up with an answer, please.
Oh my gosh, awesome. I feel like it's the chicken or the egg question, correct, right? And I don't know if I have an exact answer. However, I do think healthy cultures that also align these pillars of, curiosity and being genuine and empathetic and having, courageous conversations, they are going to amplify the best of those leaders. I believe that when you put people into highly, and again, I was actually speaking to some young people yesterday. Every culture is going to have hard days, right? I think that we somehow think like the perfect culture never has, challenging moments. Every culture will have challenging moments. However, if we have more really productive, kind of growth driven days, and I mean kind of human growth driven days in our cultures, we're going to bring out the best of who those people are with psychological safety and allow them to kind of experiment and grow. And if you have toxic cultures, you're not going to allow for people to be their best selves. So I do believe that the chances of having really fabulous leaders being able to flourish in very toxic cultures becomes much less. But having cultures that are striving to be the best they can be, knowing that sometimes we're not always our best, or there's, quarters that are tough, but striving to be the best we can be, then we are going to see leaders be better than they would have been if we didn't have that kind of culture.
Okay.
How's that? I don't know.
Thank you.
The best I could do.
And so maybe if I just pick up a little bit, I mean, we've talked about the fact that you're in, Raleigh, North Carolina, but you're also, part of the team. You're delivering programs in Singapore and Portugal, and we're really fortunate. What if anything is different, when you get the chance to work with different people from different cultures? Do you find anything different, or are those core, human desires are pretty common?
Yes and yes, right? Yes, you see cultural differences. And
Yeah.
yet, the one thing I want to be really sensitive to is, yes, we see absolutely there are cultural differences between the United States, Europe, and Asia. However, there are cultural differences in different, areas of the United States. There are cultural differences in different areas of Asia.
Yeah.
So being sensitive that we're not painting broad strokes there, and realizing that and educating ourselves when we walk into a different region of the world or a different region of your own country,
Yeah.
to know what is, polite and what is acceptable and what is not, I think is just common courtesy, quite honestly. And I do believe that those human core needs, those team needs, those leadership needs that we've been discussing, are pretty universal. People want to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
They really do. They want to be seen and heard. And I don't think it matters where you are in the globe, that now how you actually pull that out in people and how you actually interact with seeing and hearing can change per region. But I think that that's a deep human need and desire that does not change wherever you are on the planet.
Cool. Stu, did you want to jump in, or do you want?
Oh, I was just sort of thinking, I suppose, if you fast forward now, what do you think the future sort of looks like? Is it going to be, and again, I know we touched on this before, you said it's ebbs and flows, but what do you think will be the key sort of focus areas, or leadership development challenges sort of in the next short to medium term?
I think that it's probably not surprising anybody. I think that we're still figuring out a post-COVID world. I think specifically organizations are trying to navigate hybrid work, virtual work. How are we leading teams in those spaces and environments? I'm always asked, I mean, probably weekly by leaders, what should I do? And I laugh, I don't have the answer. I think that every organization is different, and realizing that what's working over here, I think that in the news, we just heard that Amazon's calling everybody back. That's a very big name. That may work for Amazon. It may not work for your organization. And so really realizing that unique challenge is not going to have a universal answer. And I think we're going to still see that as an area of learning, quite honestly. I think the other big element, and Damien, you and I were touching on this, is the major impact of AI. And you've heard about it, but AI will, from the perspective that we all are talking about, it will impact people. I think that somehow we think about machine learning and computers and, what does that mean for business? And yes, of course, but there are going to be people impacted. And what does that mean? And how do we leverage it for good? How do we leverage it to make our people better? Not to maybe, outsource everything that we do to a machine in some warehouse, where there's, these, huge kind of processing elements, but how do we use it to be the best kind of employees, workers, teams, leaders that we can be, and kind of reframe it, not as the enemy, but as kind of a wonderful tool. And I think we'll continue to see that over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Cool. And then, so when we've touched on sort of, the some pivotal moments that you've had that have informed your view, I've got two questions, and then we might need to wrap up. But first question is, right now, if I say who inspires you from a leadership perspective, is there someone currently that you look to, that you draw inspiration from, apart from Sue and myself? So is there anyone?
Y'all are top of my list.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
You go.
I thought about that question, and I really wanted, again, I wanted the answer to be something that, anybody kind of listening to this conversation would know the person.
Yeah.
I kind of kept on coming back to, I think there are great leaders out there. I think they're great sports leaders and coaches. I think they're great leaders of organizations. I think that they're a lot of great leaders. I have been inspired recently by, it just happens to be 2 women in my life who have been just incredible leaders in organizations for many, many years.
Yep.
And they've decided to go out on their own and take their expertise. And it's so lovely to see them be able to kind of flourish when they've been allowed to have autonomy. And I've been super inspired by these 2 women and what they've been doing in the last 9-10 months, and how they're impacting the people around them, and how, they've seen what has gone on in organizations, and they've taken some great things with them, and they've changed some things up that maybe they would have changed if it was their own organization. So now that it is their own organization, they're doing it differently. I love that.
Good. And then final question, which is, I quite often ask people this question, what do you know now that you wish you'd known earlier on in your career? I know it's a sort of a basic question, but if there's if you go back and talk to 20-year-old Jen, what would be the advice now?
I think the advice is, if you can do it well with diplomacy, you're never too young to speak truth to power. And I was always really, really, I'm firstborn, and I wanted to please, and I think that there's a real benefit if you see something, say something in the most diplomatic way. Sometimes it has to be behind closed doors. We want to do this with a very fragile mindset. But if you see something you think can be better in your organization, don't keep it to yourself because you think you're too young. Don't keep it to yourself because you think you're too early in career. Say it, say it with a lot of, kind of care. But say it to the right people, because they may not see it. And you, as a young person, see things that the rest of us kind of can't see the more seasoned we get. And we need you. We need you.
Love it. That's what a great way to end, and really positive and inspiring. And so thank you very much for your time, Jen. Really, really appreciate it. We could keep on going, right? We could, Sue's great question about culture and leadership. We could keep on going, but so thank you very much. Some really great insights from you, and loved hearing your stories. Sue, what did Jen get you thinking about? What's your takeaway from today?
So I've written wholly unique and exactly similar, because again, doing some consulting work, you think, oh, wow, this is unique. And actually you go, it's probably not. They are and they aren't. Yeah. So I thought that was lovely. And your last one, you said never too young to speak truth to power. I actually think that's a universal. That should be never not speak truth to power, regardless of whatever background you come from, because I often see some people get really intimidated or get a bit nervous. Well, the boss said, or so-and-so said, and you actually go, I'm sure he or she said that with the best of intentions, but I think if they maybe approached it this way, the outcome would be so much better for the organisation and the individuals. But it's about being brave. So I think that's probably what I've really taken away from it is that leadership is about being brave and courageous.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. And Jen, thank you so much again. Really, great pleasure to have you on our respective couches. And Sue, good to see you again. In the meantime, if you're watching this and you want to learn more about OMC Group and the work that we do, omc-group.com.au, and would love to talk more. But Jen, Sue, thank you very much, and we'll see you later.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it. I am so happy to have been invited. Thank y'all.